Hey everybody, and welcome to the Double Step Podcast. I'm Dan.
I'm Charity.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Al.
And
Al.
Lynn.
Al.
I'm sneaky.
His name is so long.
You sound very similar to Alan.
we got an imposter in the midst.
So
right.
I was wondering, are there any bookworms among us?
Oh, that's definitely me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
She's all book and partial worm.
Oh,
so.
well, yeah. Sarah?
I enjoy reading. Now, I must admit, I don't read as... Okay, I read a lot of articles online, and I still read books, but I don't know if that really fits me in,
Did you
in that
used
category.
to?
Oh, yeah, all the
Okay.
time.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's actually just a curious question because I used to read a lot more and then I stopped and now
Yeah.
I've been getting back into it.
Yeah,
in a
I
big
always
way.
see you with a
I
book.
always have a book now. Yeah, it seems like so. It seems like that's a lot. The case with a lot of people our age is
Yeah.
like a lot of people I know. Well, I used to read all the time, and then I don't know if it was the
I
internet.
think
or
school
what
and
the deal is,
education gets in the way of your reading.
that could be it
Yeah.
too.
Which is ironic because that's all it is, just a bunch of textbook knowledge.
But see, that's reading that you're forced to do, not because you want to
enjoy
do it.
Yeah.
So then I was wondering then if everybody at least used to read, even if they don't read right now, what kind of genre of books did you like to read or do you like to read?
Mysteries, murder mysteries.
Like
oh,
Agatha
for
Christie?
Sure. I started reading Agatha Christie at a really young age because I would read all the time, and I pretty much went through a lot of the books in my age range, and I was like, well, guess I'm going up. So you do the young adult books and you do the adult books. Yep. But we used to do the summer reading program at the library.
Book it.
Yeah, well, book it too.
Oh,
But there was
yeah.
the summer reading program at the library where you would get, you would get prizes. Like you would read a certain number of books and you go to Dairy Queen or you get a drink from a gas station or something, big prizes. Yeah. And then book it, we would do, what was it, like 10 books or something? You got like a personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut. Yeah. And I would go through books. I will say for Book It, I did lie a little bit, but then I went back and made up for it because you had to read it within a month's time.
It's going to come make sure you pay back all those pizzas.
No.
You know what you did 20 years ago? You better give us that pizza back.
If no one from Indiana listens to it, I'm good. I'm in Kansas now, so they can't find me.
Yeah, take that distance.
The
Pizza Hut is
statutory
everywhere.
laws are
It's true.
do not reach. Do not apply.
Do they still do that? Do they still do the personal?
I don't think they do Book It, though. Do they? Pizza Hut?
Did they bring it back?
I don't think
It was gone for a while, I know.
You know what? I know that my girls have gotten personal pizzas from reading, but I don't know if it. I know that it is a part of the summer reading because they get tons of stuff. Like
the
you
prizes
mentioned
are
the
probably
drinks, but they also get like meals from Carlos O'Kelly's Chipotle, and there's all kinds of stuff.
Really? Is there an adult prize reading program?
Yeah,
like I'll jump on that real quick.
So there's a big read, but you don't get any prizes for it.
Oh yeah, speaking of big read, this past big read, which we're talking about Wichita's big read, the city of Wichita. Like I don't know how they get it, but
it's like a community-based reading program.
Maybe I don't know exactly how it's nominated, but every year they nominate like a book to read. And this past one, Lab Girl, fantastic. I don't know, I can't remember the name of the author. I think Jurgen or something.
What's it about?
It's about this. It's sort of a memoir, but I don't know if it's been fictionalized or it's based on. But it's about this woman's account from her love of science into the struggles of becoming a professional in science and being a professor, and her relationships with her students and her longtime lab partner named Bill. But it's a really good read. It's hilarious. Some of the stories that she talks about in it, I totally hijacked it. Hold on one second. They were talking about, maybe this is for after hours. I'll save this for after hours. But it's a good book. It was so much better than the previous years, which was Station 11, which was not.
You didn't like that one?
Good.
I heard about that in relationship to. I've read Wanderers by Chuck Wendig, and there was a big comparison about that in Station 11.
Maybe I don't know. I think it was Emily St. John.
That's who wrote. I think that's what it was. Station 11. Is that
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know. It was, it jumped back and forth in time, which was odd. The progression of the characters and how they fit together and how they were connected. I felt at the end it just wasn't. It wasn't a. It was
kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah, it was a letdown. It was a letdown. So I was really excited that this past year's, which
they made up for it.
Good. Yeah. Lab Girl. I fully endorse. Great book.
That's interesting that you say memoir, because I've always been curious what's the definition or what's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography.
Well, a geisha has to write it, right?
Oh, a joke.
That literally took me like it took me 10 more seconds than it should have. I was like, wait, here it comes.
It's coming. So if you hear that awkward bit of silence and escalation, you know exactly.
Should we put in some canned laughter from like I Love Lucy? Just be like,
Alan, he's so funny.
That's hilarious.
So what's the difference in memoirs?
Yeah, so I guess a memoir. Well, I guess an autobiography is telling your life story from like childhood to whenever, but I guess
accurately as possible, right?
As accurately as possible, but I guess the memoir gives more specific details, more intimate details into that.
Okay, then this is a memoir.
So, which I always thought wouldn't an autobiography be that anyway, because you're delving into your life.
Not necessarily. I mean, like I said, there are some very personal stories that she tells about about people that are somehow related to her and her experiments and her labs.
So maybe it's like a square and a rectangle, right? Like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Maybe
don't go back to math class. Dan, if you grew up with me in school, you would know not to use that reference.
Like maybe all autobiographies are memoirs, but not all memoirs are autobiographies.
I'll go along with that, though. Okay. That does make sense.
But we're all elongated squares here, right?
That's right.
So since you're wondering about that, is that a genre you're interested in? Is like nonfiction?
Even as a kid, I've actually preferred nonfiction over fiction.
Have you? Okay.
I've always enjoyed. Well, see, Cherry nods her head in, I don't know, disgust or something.
I'm the only one in my family, I recently found out, that reads fiction. Everyone else reads like textbooks or self-help books or stuff like that. No, I'm the only one who enjoys sitting down with a regular book and like, yeah, I do like to escape.
But see, I like learning.
You can learn in a fiction book.
Well, see,
you learn how not to get murdered.
What they sell on other planets.
Yeah. Or you learn how to murder someone. It depends on what side of the story you want to be on.
Yeah. Charity was way too quick in answering that one. But no, but I've always enjoyed the nonfiction aspect. Now, I mean, as a younger kid, most of it is nonfiction. So, I mean, I grew up reading Boxcar Children and like the American Girl series and stuff like that. But once I hit about, I don't know, 8 or 9, Alan's read them all.
Alan, you know you love that Let's Meet Samantha book.
No way.
I read Boxcar Children.
Boxcar Children is a special thing in itself because this is turning into those book club reading programs. This is basically what this podcast is. But what I enjoy about the Boxcar Children, which I've kind of incorporated into the style I read, the very first one takes place in the 1930s, right? You know, it was during the Great Depression, and these 4 kids are trying to survive, essentially, and then they live in a boxcar. So the first.
I haven't read this. Is it a series?
It's a series. Yeah,
it's a series. Yeah. Gertrude Chandler Warner was the author.
Jeez, I didn't remember that.
Yeah,
I knew it.
Well, because at the end of the book, they always give the thing about her life, her little blurb, and I always read that part.
She was a boxcar child?
She was not. At least I don't think so.
It's not like Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah. I was the boxcar. but what I enjoy about the Boxcar Children, the very first one, is because I can see the history in it because it took place in the 1930s, and that's the kind of era I like learning fiction. About. Yeah. So, but historic fiction, that's something I enjoyed in elementary school and high school.
I hated historical fiction in school. I remember that because we had to read
The Medallion.
Yeah, no, The Medallion I liked, but in 6th grade we had to read this book on World War II, and it was all about, and like, not downplaying Holocaust and all that. Like, I know it's a terrible time, but when you're in 5th or 6th grade, like, that's kind of it's a lot to take in. It's kind of scary. You don't know how to process it, and like, you didn't want to do the assignment anyway because it's homework. And so after that, I was like, never reading historical fiction again. Like, obviously now I've grown out of that, but growing up, I did not want to do historical fiction.
No, but I've always enjoyed that kind of stuff. But when I hit about 8 or 9, something like that, I had like this crisis because I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm too young for these kid books, but I'm too old for the adult books, but I don't know what I want to read. And so sometimes my mom, we would go to the library like once a week or something like that.
We were there all the time.
We went there a lot.
Yeah.
And I would just kind of just kind of wander. I'm like, I don't know what I want to read. I don't know what I like, And so after a while, I like how Charity's enjoying
because
this.
okay, we grew up in Indiana. I don't even know if it's still there. Pike Library in Indianapolis.
Yes.
So when they had redid this children's section, they had this huge pirate ship in the middle of the room, and inside the pirate ship was this like cushioned seated area
with books. You can read inside the ship.
Yeah. So meanwhile, while Sarah's wandering the library trying to figure out what the heck a book is, I would grab a stack of books. Like once we went into the library, I'd take off, go get a stack of books, and I'm just sitting in this pirate ship, like
just flying through.
Yeah, I would just read it, and I would have about a few books read before we even left the library. Like I had my books I wanted to check out, and I had the books I wanted to read in the pirate ship.
It sounds like you're describing the intro to Reading Rainbow. Or something.
It does.
Okay, I love Reading Rainbow. That was my show. I love that show.
Yeah, LeVar Burton, you're amazing.
I know, and I will say this: LeVar Burton has a very extensive career, but I will always reference him to Reading Rainbow. Like
always.
He's Reading Rainbow. Okay, well, I wasn't nerdy enough to get into Star Trek, but
no, Reading Rainbow, absolutely.
But nonfiction, I really enjoy that. But I'm also a writer, so I enjoy reading the nonfiction and then writing fiction based off of that.
Oh, interesting. So you don't enjoy reading fiction as much, but you like writing
I like writing it.
That's interesting.
So,
that makes sense, though, because you can tweak the story the way that you would want it to be.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so I've been doing that. I've been a script writer since I was like a teenager. So that's how I do it. So it's like research / entertainment. But the last, I can't say the last one, the recent nonfiction books or fiction books that I enjoyed was when we were in high school, we read The Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like classic literature is amazing. That and Shakespeare and stuff like that. I like reading that kind of stuff.
That's how I felt about Dorian Gray. I love that
classic
story.
Literature.
Damn.
Really?
Oh no, not even. I mean, a little bit, but like so.
Is it the wording?
No, it's not even that. I just think it's boring.
Really?
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
not doing it right.
It's so boring. And here's the thing: I'm not alone in this. My wife is in English. She has a master's in English.
Yeah.
And she does, but hates classic literature.
Really?
Just can't stand. I mean, not all of it. She's a big like Jane Austen fan and stuff, but like just some of those like really.
Tolstoy.
Yeah, like the Tolstoy.
Okay, Tolstoy's
like,
a bit much.
I mean, even like, you got your Bram Stoker, which is more
Yeah.
genre, classic literature, but I mean, Charles Dickens, anything like that. It's just,
some of the
boring.
stories were sad.
Yeah, real boring.
Yeah.
And see, that's not what I mean, I still, I read quite a bit, and it's mostly like fantasy and science fiction.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But then I've been
Dune?
getting.
Have you gone through Dune?
Of course, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I have my father's edition of Dune when he was growing up. Those and his Lord of the Rings books, because he introduced me to those.
Oh, yeah, Lord of the
I still have those. They're nice and taped up because I try to keep them as much as I can. But I've also been reading more into like outside sort of like different genres. So like ergodic literature. Has anybody ever heard of that?
Oh, what does that mean?
Totally.
So
I think Alan's lying.
So it's like it's a book that is described as being, it takes non-trivial effort to read. So they basically define trivial effort as like moving your eyes, across the page and then taking in the words.
Is this like postmodern or something?
It's kind of like that. What it is typically is like the writing is all over the page in different parts. It's from different narrators.
Stuff that's like that.
House of Leaves.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Is that what that's called?
That's a type of ergodic literature. Yeah.
I had a roommate that was like, "You got to read this," and I was like, "How?"
I'm in the middle of reading it right now.
Ridiculous.
So I'm in the middle of reading that right now. And then the big one I have, I'll talk about later on. But that and then transgressive fiction, which is more like I guess sort of taboo.
You're too smart for me, Dan.
That sounds very deep.
I say that
like
right?
you gotta work hard for your book.
Fight Club. That's by Chuck Palahniuk.
transgressive?
That's a type of transgressive fiction. So
See, now I'm gonna have to do the thing and look up the term so I can read it. See, that's what I do. If there's something I don't understand, I end up looking it up, and then that's when the reading comes in. I read a lot of articles online. Mm-hmm. So while I might not necessarily have a physical book in my hand, I still do a lot of article reading.
And after you do the research, I'll come to you and get the answer in 2 seconds flat.
That's exactly what Charity does. Charity be like, I'm not going to research that. You look it up.
I ain't got the patience for all that.
She'd be
like, I can get the answer from you.
That's right. I got to read some more about. I got to find out what's going on with these boxcar kids.
Is that the new hit for the Boxcar Kids?
That's what the kids on the street say.
It'd be like boxcars with a Z.
That's right.
So, Alan, do you have any kind of genres that you like to read?
Let's see. I've gone into sort of getting out of a binge of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Yes, I have.
Oh, okay. So he was a Protestant minister that was martyred.
During
in Flossenburg.
During World War II, right?
Yeah, and the tragic thing is, I think it was like 5 days before that camp was liberated, he hung in the gallows, and a remarkable life. So I've been trying to read through. It's tough, but he makes it pretty accessible, or at least the translations that I've been reading. So that's not the kind of fun reading, but I do try to like benefit, and I've try to make my reading kind of like what you're talking about, something that I can try to apply or somehow incorporate into my life, or try to figure out how my own moralities, ethics, and things like that. And I've done a lot of philosophical articles and books and just
digging deep into yourself.
For a while, I was a part of a pipe club in college where we thought we were like philosophy minors, and we're like
intellectual.
Yeah, exactly.
You're sitting there in your toga talking about what's the meaning of life.
Yeah, basically, we'd smoke pipes at a Waffle House like at 2 a.m.
Wow,
and, like,
how collegiate is that?
I know, it was terrible, but I loved it. Loved it. Anyway,
I will say, as goofy and as much as I was laughing at you about that, I kind of wouldn't mind that myself. But that's one thing that I do miss.
Well, you would have a bubble pipe. You wouldn't be able to smoke a real one.
Oh, I would totally have a bubble pipe.
You see little bubbles floating around.
Be like, you know what? Bloop, 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 bloop. But I that's one thing that I do miss when I was in college. I mean, I miss the camaraderie and just having a group of people where we would just sit and talk for hours.
We're doing it right.
I was gonna say
now.
all we need is the pipes.
Literally, we're doing it right.
Yeah, you didn't even give me a chance to finish, but that's what I was gonna say. I was like, but I feel like I'm getting an outlet of that right now. We're basically doing what I consider restaurant conversations, where you sit in your booth, talk for 8 hours.
So
they've been
without
closed.
the food, without the books, without the pipes, but we're talking a lot.
That's right.
But that's cool. You say stuff. You're trying to get stuff to like learn to better yourselves. I do that too, but in a completely different way, because I really
Here it comes.
I really want to be good at comedy. I mean, really, surprise.
Yeah.
So I actually have some books on how to write for comedy and different types, and there's a legit science to comedy. Mm-hmm. It's a thing that people take for granted, because like, oh well, any idiot can make people laugh, but there's an actual
until they try to do it.
Do it.
That's true.
So like a lot of my books are dealing with not necessarily comedy writing, but also script writing, and I have a lot of graphic design books. So I have a lot of technically picture books, but it's for graphic designing and illustrating. But in terms of comedy, I actually have a book by Mel Helitzer, which is called Comedy Writing Secrets, and he basically delves into the different types of comedy, the scientific formula for it, how it works, do it this way. Now, I mean, I know you're not supposed to be that rigid in it, but if you know how it works, you kind of know how to create different types.
You got to know the rules so you can break them.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so it's stuff like that. So I use that in order to use that to better myself. Haven't quite gotten into the deep philosophical bit that you have, though.
Well, I want to take that as a segue, because I do, Dan and I, we've kind of bonded over books before in the past. And so there are some fiction that I really enjoy, like Ready Player One.
Yep.
We got into, and then was it Andromeda? No, it wasn't Andromeda. It was Armada. After Ready Player One. That was good too. It wasn't as good as Ready Player One.
That was pretty solid.
But and you've given me some really good suggestions too for my daughters too, because we read The Giver.
Right. Oh, it's one of my favorites growing up.
And it was powerful. I remember when we figured out why the rule that the giver couldn't be released, and he found the memory of his the giver's daughter. And all three of us were like choking back tears. I mean, it's
so you've actually read stuff that's made you cry.
Yeah, with my daughters, we try to read every night for like 15-20 minutes. We try to read a couple of chapters, and we'll pick out a chapter book. They're both old enough.
Yeah.
That we pick out a big, like we've done. The one that they absolutely love was Bridge to Terabithia. They love that book, and I hadn't read it since I was their age, and it was a really good book. Anyway.
So you mentioned a couple books now, The Giver and Bridge to Terabithia, that were made into movies.
Yeah.
So since we're all, into film and into movies and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on adapting a book to a film?
Love it. Jurassic Park.
So good.
Great movie, excellent book.
Absolutely.
Okay. I guess adaptations are okay.
Wait, hold on. I didn't know Jurassic Park was a book.
Is it by Michael Crichton? Excellent.
Okay.
Have you read any Michael Crichton?
Nope.
Homework.
I'll add it to my ever-growing list of books I still need to read.
One thing I have learned, it seems that every movie made within the past 20 or 30 years, actually no, even further back, they're all based on. I think I'm just under the impression now that every movie made is based on a book somehow.
Some of my favorites haven't been made into films yet,
and some of them they like take a twist. Like you had mentioned The Scarlet Letter, and there's an Italian film called Melina. Have you seen Melina?
No, I was thinking something different with that.
Oh, okay. Which is basically The Scarlet Letter, but it's fantastic. That's a great movie to watch too, Melina.
The Scarlet Letter was also adapted to a movie called Easy A.
Easy A. See, that's where I thought you were going until you said Italian.
No. I'm going to good cinema.
Yeah,
people do that often though.
Yes.
I mean, like 10 Things I Hate About You.
That's right.
Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah, that's like a lot of it is based off of Shakespeare. Funny enough.
Oh, of course,
absolutely.
Like if Shakespeare was still alive, he'd be suing people big time.
See, I'm a big fan of like film adaptations if they try to do it right. Like if they utilize the medium of film and then try to tell the story without trying to be too like on the nose or whatever with the book.
I know I'm very picky if they try to do the movie to the book, and I realize you gotta tell the story in a certain amount of time and you have to take out details, but some of it, like, they seem to change the whole story, which defeats the purpose of adapting it from the book. Write your own separate movie. But I have my favorite children's book. My first chapter book was Chocolate Fever.
Oh, yeah. Chocolate Fever is something that we would love to adapt.
Yeah, that would be fun to do. I love that
girls
story.
enjoy it as well.
Yeah, and that was like my first memory of reading a chapter book was Chocolate Fever. My second favorite.
Was that made into a
not that I know of.
Not that we know of, and no one. Hey, if anyone's listening, don't take it because we want to make a film out of that.
Chocolate Fever?
So that's something we've been wanting to do this for
years.
years.
Section of the.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes you can do it. You can do it well though. Sometimes you can actually change a book completely because
if you get the author involved in the making of the film. I think that's how you can keep the integrity.
So the Bourne Identity. Have you ever seen or read the Bourne Identity?
I've never read. I've seen, but
they are completely different stories.
Yeah.
I mean,
like night and day.
Like literally, they took the back like splash of the book, which was Jason Bourne gets shot, falls into the Mediterranean Sea, loses his memory, and then that's the basis for both, right?
Well,
and then they go off in two different directions.
In like the 70s or 60s.
In the 70s, it has to do with like his other. It's completely
They
different.
they probably had to change that because it was too close to James Bond, right?
They're both excellent. That's the thing that I read about because I read one and I wasn't like, I don't like one of these better than the other. I actually like them both very much equally.
So I guess if I'm ignorant of the book, then it's okay because I didn't know it was a book.
I think that's what some people say.
It is a rarity where you can like a film and like the book equally.
Right, even if they're completely different.
That's true.
So I got one more question for everybody then real quick before we finish up.
Yeah.
Do you have any book recommendations for our listeners?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So I'm a big Ted Dekker fan, which I was going to say earlier. And this is like the only series of books that I could read over and over again, even though I know how it's going to end. It's the Circle series. And so it's black, red, white, and green. And so without giving away too much of it, basically, I know you mentioned before you don't like it when it goes back and forth between like two different worlds or whatever, but that's basically what this story is about. But it's still in the present time of whatever world it's in. So he's not going to the future and back or whatever. But I don't know how, just go read it. If I give too much details, it'll give it away. But it's the Circle series by Ted Dekker. And I love that series and I can read it over and over again.
Nice.
I have two main ones, and they're kind of all within the same.
The Bible.
Well, honestly, to be honest, I can't top the Bible. But here's another good one.
Here's a good runner-up.
here's another good one. Actually, okay,
Gospel of John.
Okay,
the concordance to the Bible is a good follow-up.
I will throw in another one since she did say the Bible. There is a book written by John Acuff called Stuff Christians Like.
Yes, John Acuff.
Basically, it's the most sarcastic book you will ever read.
But it's only funny, I guess, if you grew up in a Christian home or a pastor's kid, missionary
That's
kid,
true.
because you get most of
Which
those
you guys
references.
Which we are.
Which is why we were laughing out loud reading that book.
I've never read a book that I've laughed loud and had tears streaming down my face.
I could hear Sarah. Sarah was in the basement, and I was 2 floors up in my room, and I could hear her through my vent. She was laughing so loud.
So talking about how you had a book that almost made you cry. This one made me literally laugh out
Tears
loud.
of laughter.
But the other 2 books I was going to recommend, of course, they're within the comedy thing. I'd already mentioned Comedy Writing Secrets by Mel Hellitzer. I think it's the 2nd edition book. It's a yellow cover with a little stick person slipping on a banana peel. That's how you know it's a Comedy Writing Secret. Awesome information about the science of comedy. It's an actual textbook that college students use. The other one I would recommend is an actual, I guess, autobiography, but I almost want to say memoir. Now I'm not quite sure anymore. But there's a comedic duo that I love a lot. They're called Morecambe and Wise.
Back to the British comedy.
Back to the British comedies. They were a comedy duo back in the 60s, 70s and stuff. But they're the closest to my sense of humor that you will ever find out. But they did a book, so it's called Eric and Ernie by Morecambe and Wise, because that's their names. And so it tells their story about how they got started in the comedy and just their experience from then up until I think the book was written in like 73, so up until that present time of 1973. Nice. It's a really great book, and it's autobiography, but I think they recorded their
thought process.
Their thought process. So it was almost written like it's kind of transcribed from a recording. That's what it sounds like. But it's a great book. So those are my 2 recommendations.
Alan?
Man, this is always the tough one. Because you remember we were talking about like stats and like I don't have a mind for stats.
Yeah.
Instantly, like titles disappear. And
what's a book?
Yeah, exactly. I do read good, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, you did give some recommendations earlier in the podcast.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of.
Well, you probably know books to read with your kids. That's probably a better question to ask you.
So if you want to appeal to the
bedtime stories with
uncrushed.
Alan. So what would you suggest?
I got a good one that I loved as a child and my kids love, and I don't remember the version of this one. But the illustrations are gorgeous. It's St. George, the Dragon Slayer, and
that sounds
familiar.
familiar. That one. I wonder if I actually read that.
It's a common, or it's an English folk story.
Okay,
about.
I do like reading folklore and stuff. So
this version of the story, it's more for the illustrations that comes along with it. I remember absolutely loving it. As a kid. I also I got another recommendation.
Okay.
And I actually got this for my daughter for her birthday, and it's a female protagonist that grows up and she has some body issues, and she runs away and goes to an island and stays there for a year. It's called The Island Keeper, and it's it's out of print. It's very hard to find. I had to get it from like a thrift store somewhere, maybe even Indiana. I don't know.
Nice tie in there, Alan.
Yes, and it.
I can't go back to Indiana because of the Book It pizza.
But if I could bring that back into print so that libraries could get it, that'd be fantastic. The Island Keeper, and the author escapes me, but fantastic story for young girls and young boys. I mean, obviously, I read it when I was a child, and it's about just a young protagonist that and it kind of on a previous podcast that we did that had to deal with outdoors and survival and camping. Yeah, it was interesting. Her seclusion and finding herself, surviving, gaining confidence, and then becoming the woman she was meant to be.
Your girls seem really smart. Like, I feel like they're reading books outside of their age range.
Yeah. I know we
was
did.
Tested.
Yeah.
She reads at a 10th grade level.
Nice.
10th grade level.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what grade level do you still read at, Alan?
10th grade level.
Like father, like daughter.
What is complimentary?
So I'll run through mine real quick.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
One is one I was talking about earlier when I was talking about ergodic literature, and that is S by Doug Dorst and J.J. Abrams.
As in the letter S?
Yes, in the letter S.
So the author is longer than the title.
J.J. Abrams
does everything.
Write a novel, basically. And what it is
have a day off?
No, probably not. This book fascinated me because I found it on the shelves. I wasn't even looking around for it, and it's got a slipcover on it. And you look at it, and it looks like the binding of one of those old library books. It's like that kind of coarse material that you touch. Yeah. And it even has an old library like Dewey Decimal System on the spine of it. Nice. And what it is you pull that out, and that's what the book is. And it's supposed to be this old lost book that was written back in the day. And then you flip it open, and you find out that the story is the story of the book that you can read. But then in the margins, 2 characters have found this book in the library, and they are writing notes back and forth to each other and leaving it in the book to try to figure out what happened to the author. But here's where it gets crazy. They're in different colored ink when they're writing. They do this once when they first meet each other through this book, and then when they get to the end, they go back and they do it again in different colored ink. So there's 3 different stories being told in this book. There's the story of the fictional novel. Yeah. There's a story of these people trying to figure out what happened to the author. And then there's the story after they find out what happened to the author, and they're like, what they do after that. But throughout the book is newspaper clippings and like little knickknacks that are shoved into the pages of the book. That tie into like what's going on.
I am very intrigued.
Wow. I know. It almost sounds like a Lemony Snicket, like the series of Fortunate Events. There's like the story of the kids, but then there's the story of like the secret society that their parents were a part of and stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it's very cool, and it depends. The whole conversation around the book is how do you read it? Do you read one thing first? You try to read each page. It's crazy. The other one I have is more traditional. It's called Lost Horizon by James Hilton. It was written back in the 30s.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yep.
Ronald Coleman. Well. Yeah, Ronald Coleman, yes.
And that book just really spoke to me a lot. I don't even know. I think it's really good. It's a really easy, short read. But if you're not really looking into something that's going to be really challenging like S, it's a much easier read. So.
Has S been made into a
movie or anything?
Or something?
No, S is like, the special thing about it is it's really can only exist as a fictional book or as a physical book. Because you have all these little extras and like this
leave it to an executive
like
producer to try and ruin it.
And then we'll play film critic and be like, here's what was wrong with it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for talking books with me today.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you get done listening to our podcast, go read a book. Thanks for listening. You can find other episodes on doublestuffpod.com or your favorite podcast app. You can also join in the fun on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Double Stuff Podcast and on Twitter at DoubleStuffP, as in the letter P. All right. Well, thanks everybody for talking books with me today.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, when you get done listening to our podcast, go read a book.
Yeah, jump in under the cover.
Go between the sheets. A joke that nobody would get. That can't even be after hours. That's called inside joke edition.